Donald Trump, the president who broke every rule. June 16, 2015. Trump Tower, New York City. A golden escalator descends into history. The man riding it is about to shatter every rule of American politics. But what nobody expected was that he would actually win. Donald John Trump didn't enter politics like other candidates. He bulldozed his way in. No political experience. No filter. No apologies. While other politicians carefully crafted their messages, Trump spoke like he was still in a boardroom firing people on reality television. And America couldn't look away. But this moment didn't come from nowhere. This was decades in the making. Born in Queens in 1946, Trump grew up watching his father Fred build a real estate empire. Fred was tough, ruthless, and taught his son one lesson above all others: never show weakness. That philosophy would define everything Trump would become. In the 1970s and 80s, Trump took his father's fortune and turned it into a brand. Trump Tower, Trump Plaza, Trump Casino. The name became synonymous with wealth, excess, and controversy. But what people forget is that Trump nearly lost it all. In the early 1990s, his casinos were hemorrhaging money. He was billions in debt. Most people would have disappeared. Trump did something different. He turned his failure into theater. He wrote books about his comeback. He starred in a hit TV show. He made himself famous for being famous. And that celebrity became his most powerful weapon. Naquili memento tudo mudo. When Trump descended that escalator in 2015, political experts laughed. They called him a joke, a distraction, a sideshow. He had no ground game, no political infrastructure. He insulted war heroes, mocked disabled reporters, and bragged about things that would have ended any other campaign. And yet, with every controversy, his poll numbers rose. But what nobody expected was how perfectly he understood modern media. Trump didn't need traditional campaign strategies. He had Twitter. He had cable news. Every outrageous statement guaranteed 24-hour coverage. While Hillary Clinton spent $1 billion on ads, Trump got billions in free media just by being provocative. He didn't play by the rules because he rewrote them in real time. The Republican primaries became a bloodbath. 16 experienced politicians stood on stage with Trump. One by one, he demolished them. Jeb Bush, once the frontrunner, was branded low energy and never recovered. Marco Rubio became Little Marco. Ted Cruz was Lion Ted. Trump used nicknames like weapons and they stuck. He didn't debate policy, he dominated personalities. And Republican voters loved it. Essa deciso tiria consequentias irreversives. By the summer of 2016, Trump had secured the nomination. The political establishment was in shock. But the real earthquake was still coming. Hillary Clinton was the most prepared candidate in modern history. Former First Lady, Senator, Secretary of State. She had every advantage: money, organization, experience, endorsements. The polls showed her winning easily. Election night was supposed to be a coronation. November 8, 2016. The world watched as the impossible happened. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, states that hadn't voted Republican in decades flipped red. By 2:30 a.m., Donald Trump was president-elect of the United States. Half the country celebrated. The other half couldn't believe what they were seeing. Political scientists scrambled to explain how every model, every prediction, every expert had been wrong. But Trump knew something they didn't. He understood that millions of Americans felt forgotten. While Democrats focused on identity politics and coastal elites celebrated globalization, Trump spoke directly to workers who had lost their jobs to outsourcing. He promised to bring back coal, steel, manufacturing. He promised to build a wall and make America great again. It didn't matter if the promises were realistic. What mattered was that someone was finally saying them out loud. Naquili memento tudo mudo para sempre. January 20, 2017. Inauguration Day. Trump stood before the Capitol and delivered one of the most controversial inaugural addresses in history. He spoke of American carnage, painting a dark picture of a nation in decline. Previous presidents had used the moment to unite the country. Trump used it to declare war on the establishment. He called out politicians standing right behind him. He promised that this American carnage stops right here and stops right now. The crowd size became the first controversy. Trump insisted his inauguration had the largest audience ever, despite clear photographic evidence to the contrary. His press secretary repeated the claim. When challenged, Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway introduced a phrase that would define the era: alternative facts. The line between truth and political spin had always been blurry. Trump didn't just blur it. He erased it completely. But what nobody expected was how far he would take this approach. Within days, Trump signed executive orders at a pace never seen before. The travel ban targeting Muslim-majority countries triggered chaos at airports nationwide. Protesters flooded the streets. Courts blocked the order. Trump attacked the judges on Twitter. The pattern was set. Trump acts, institutions react. Trump attacks institutions, his base rallies harder. The cycle repeated over and over. His first 100 days shattered every norm. He fired the FBI director investigating Russian interference in the election. He called the press the enemy of the people. He praised dictators while insulting Democratic allies. Every week brought a new crisis. His approval ratings were the lowest ever recorded for a new president. And yet his core supporters never wavered. They loved that he was fighting. It didn't matter what he was fighting for or against. The fight itself was the point. Essa deciso tiria consequentias irreversibles. The investigation into Russian interference became an obsession. Special counsel Robert Mueller was appointed, and for 2 years, the question hung over everything. Did Trump's campaign collude with Russia to win the election? Trump called it a witch hunt hundreds of times. He attacked Mueller, the FBI, the intelligence agencies. He called them the deep state trying to overturn the will of the people. But what the investigation revealed was more complex than either side wanted to admit. Mueller found extensive Russian interference. He found over 100 contacts between the Trump campaign and Russian-linked individuals. He found that Trump's campaign chairman had shared polling data with Russian intelligence. But he stopped short of concluding there was a criminal conspiracy. On obstruction of justice, Mueller laid out 10 episodes where Trump potentially broke the law but refused to make a final judgment, citing Justice Department policy against indicting a sitting president. Trump declared total victory. His supporters believed he'd been vindicated. His opponents believed he'd escaped justice on a technicality. The truth, as always, was somewhere in the middle. But in Trump's America, there was no middle anymore. You were either with him or against him. Nequili memento, everything became tribal. The Trump presidency wasn't governed by policy positions. It was governed by loyalty tests. Cabinet members came and went at a staggering pace. If you praised Trump, you stayed. If you criticized him even once, you were gone. His first chief of staff lasted 6 months. His first Secretary of State called him a moron and was fired by tweet. His first Attorney General recused himself from the Russia investigation and spent 2 years being publicly humiliated before finally being pushed out. But what nobody expected was how this chaos would become its own form of strategy. While critics focused on the latest scandal, Trump was remaking the judiciary. He appointed more federal judges in 1 term than most presidents appoint in 2. He placed 3 justices on the Supreme Court, cementing a conservative majority for a generation. He cut regulations at a historic pace. He passed a massive tax cut. He renegotiated NAFTA. Whether you agreed with these policies or not, Trump was accomplishing what he'd promised. His supporters didn't care about the chaos. They cared about results. The economy became Trump's greatest weapon. Unemployment hit historic lows. The stock market soared. Wages rose. For millions of Americans, their 401ks had never looked better. Trump took credit for everything, even trends that started under Obama. His rallies became celebrations of economic nationalism. He painted himself as the blue-collar billionaire fighting for forgotten workers against globalist elites. The contradiction didn't matter. The message worked. But beneath the surface, something dangerous was building. Trump's attacks on the media intensified. He called journalists fake news, so often that his supporters began to distrust all mainstream reporting. He shared conspiracy theories on Twitter. He retweeted white nationalists. He said there were very fine people on both sides, after a neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville ended with a woman being murdered. Each incident was explained away, rationalized, defended by his supporters while opponents grew more alarmed. Essa deciso tiria consequences irreversives. The 2018 midterms saw Democrats take back the House of Representatives. Trump now faced real oversight for the first time. Congressional committees launched investigations. They subpoenaed documents. They demanded testimony. Trump ordered his administration to ignore every subpoena. He claimed total immunity and absolute privilege. He was daring Congress to stop him. They tried, and it led to his first impeachment. The phone call with Ukraine's president seemed routine at first. But when a whistleblower revealed that Trump had pressured a foreign leader to investigate Joe Biden, everything exploded. Trump had allegedly withheld military aid to force Ukraine to dig up dirt on his political rival. Democrats called it an abuse of power and bribery. Republicans called it a policy dispute. The battle lines were drawn before anyone even read the transcript. Nequili memento, the Constitution itself became a partisan document. The impeachment hearings were a spectacle. Witnesses testified about Trump's pressure campaign. His defenders attacked the witnesses, attacked the process, attacked everything except the core facts. When the House voted to impeach in December 2019, it was almost entirely along party lines. Trump became only the third president ever impeached. His approval rating barely moved. His supporters saw a political hit job. His opponents saw a president above the law. The Senate trial was predetermined. Republicans held the majority. They refused to call witnesses. They refused to consider new evidence. After a brief trial, Trump was acquitted. He'd survived. And he immediately claimed he'd done nothing wrong, despite multiple officials testifying otherwise under oath. The impeachment, rather than weakening him, made him more defiant. But what nobody expected was what would happen just 2 months later. COVID-19 hit America like a freight train. By March 2020, the country was in lockdown. The stock market crashed. Millions lost their jobs. Hospitals overflowed. And Trump faced the greatest crisis of his presidency. His response would define everything that came after. At first, Trump downplayed the virus. He called it a Democratic hoax. He said it would disappear like a miracle. He compared it to the flu. He resisted lockdowns, resisted masks, resisted the advice of his own health experts. Dr. Anthony Fauci became a household name, and Trump grew to resent him for getting more attention. The president suggested injecting disinfectant. He promoted unproven drugs. He held rallies while the death toll climbed. Essa deciso tiria consequences irreversives aelum de qualquer imaginaco. By summer 2020, over 100,000 Americans were dead. The economy was in ruins. Cities were erupting in protests after the murder of George Floyd. Trump's poll numbers collapsed. Joe Biden, the former vice president, held a commanding lead. Trump's path to re-election seemed impossible. But Trump had never followed conventional political logic before. Why start now? The 2020 campaign was unlike anything in American history. Biden barely campaigned in person, running from his basement due to COVID. Trump held massive rallies, defying health guidelines, mocking Biden's caution. He called Biden Sleepy Joe, questioned his mental fitness, accused him of being controlled by radical socialists. The attacks were relentless, but they weren't working like they had in 2016. Trump knew he was losing, so he began laying the groundwork for what would come next. Months before a single vote was cast, he started claiming the election would be rigged. He attacked mail-in voting, even though he voted by mail himself. He said the only way he could lose was through fraud. He was priming his supporters to reject the results if he lost. But what nobody expected was how many people would believe him. November 3, 2020. Election night began with Trump ahead in key states. He declared victory early in the morning, claiming Democrats were trying to steal the election. But as mail-in ballots were counted over the following days, Biden's lead grew. By Saturday, Networks called the race for Biden. He'd won with over 81 million votes, the most in American history. Trump refused to concede. He filed dozens of lawsuits. He pressured state officials to overturn results. He called the election the greatest theft in American history. His legal challenges went nowhere. Judges he'd appointed dismissed his cases for lack of evidence. His own attorney general said there was no fraud. His cybersecurity chief called it the most secure election in American history and was fired for saying so. The evidence was overwhelming. Biden had won fairly, but Trump couldn't admit defeat. His ego wouldn't allow it. Nequili memento, democracy itself hung in the balance. Trump's rhetoric grew more desperate. He tweeted conspiracy theories. He shared debunked claims of voting machines changing votes. He pressured state legislators to ignore their voters and send Trump electors instead. He called the governor of Georgia and asked him to find exactly enough votes to flip the state. The call was recorded. It was potential criminal solicitation. Trump didn't care. He was fighting to overturn the election by any means necessary. His supporters began to mobilize. Stop the Steal became a rallying cry. Protests erupted at state capitals. Armed groups stood outside election offices. The rhetoric turned violent, and Trump kept pouring gasoline on the fire. January 6, 2021. The day Congress would certify Biden's victory. Trump called for a massive rally in Washington. "Be there, we'll be wild," he tweeted. Thousands answered. They gathered on the ellipse as Trump spoke. He told them the election had been stolen. He told them to fight like hell. He told them to march to the Capitol. "You'll never take back our country with weakness," he said. But what nobody expected was that they would actually storm the Capitol building. The mob broke through police lines. They smashed windows. They flooded into the halls of Congress. Lawmakers fled. The vice president was evacuated. Police officers were beaten. One rioter was shot trying to breach the House chamber. Another officer died from injuries sustained in the attack. Confederate flags waved inside the Capitol for the first time in history. Rioters sat in the Senate chamber, in the Speaker's office. They hunted for members of Congress. Some chanted "Hang Mike Pence," because the vice president refused Trump's demand to overturn the election. For hours, Trump watched on television and did nothing. His aides begged him to call off the mob. He resisted. When he finally released a video, he told the rioters, "We love you. You're very special," while asking them to go home. Even in that moment, he repeated the lie that the election was stolen. The attack on the Capitol shocked the world. 5 people died. Over 140 police officers were injured. The peaceful transfer of power, a cornerstone of American democracy for over 2 centuries, had been violently interrupted. Congressional leaders from both parties condemned the violence. Some of Trump's closest allies abandoned him. His second impeachment came 1 week later. 10 Republicans joined Democrats in voting to impeach Trump for inciting insurrection. It was the most bipartisan impeachment vote in history, but in the Senate trial, only 7 Republicans voted to convict. Trump was acquitted again. He'd left office by then, but the acquittal meant he could run for president again. And that's exactly what he planned to do. The years after his presidency were unprecedented. Trump remained the dominant figure in Republican politics. He endorsed candidates in primaries and most won. Those who voted to impeach him were targeted. Many retired rather than face his wrath. He held rallies where crowds chanted his name. He continued claiming the 2020 election was stolen. Millions of Americans believed him, but legal troubles were mounting. The Justice Department investigated his retention of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. The FBI executed a search warrant and found hundreds of classified files. Trump claimed he'd declassified them with his mind. Legal experts called that absurd. He was indicted, then indicted again for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Then indicted by Georgia for election interference. Then indicted in New York for falsifying business records related to hush money payments. For criminal indictments, 91 felony charges. No former president had ever faced anything remotely similar. Nequili memento, Trump did something remarkable. He turned his legal troubles into a campaign strategy. Each indictment, rather than hurting him, energized his base. They saw political persecution. They saw the establishment trying to stop him. His poll numbers rose with each charge. He raised millions in donations. His primary opponents couldn't compete. By early 2024, it was clear Trump would be the Republican nominee again. The 2024 campaign became a referendum on American democracy itself. Trump promised retribution against his enemies. He called his opponents vermin. He said he'd be a dictator only on day one. He praised authoritarians. He talked about using the Justice Department to prosecute Biden. He suggested terminating parts of the Constitution. His rhetoric grew darker, more ominous. But what nobody expected was that voters would give him another chance. November 2024. Trump defeated Kamala Harris, who had replaced Biden at the top of the ticket after a disastrous debate performance led to the president withdrawing from the race. Trump won both the Electoral College and the popular vote. He would return to the White House with a Republican Senate and possibly a Republican House. This time, he'd learned from his first term. No more establishment figures who would constrain him. He promised to appoint loyalists who would execute his vision without question. January 20th, 2025. Donald Trump was sworn in as president for the second time. At 78 years old, he became the oldest president ever inaugurated and the first president since Grover Cleveland to serve non-consecutive terms. But this inauguration was different. There was no pretense of unity. Trump's speech was defiant, victorious. He'd survived impeachments, indictments, a criminal conviction, assassination attempts. Nothing had stopped him, and he made it clear he wasn't going to hold back this time. Essa deciso tiria consequentias que ainda estamos descobrindo. The Trump story is one that will be debated for generations. Was he a populist hero who gave voice to the forgotten? Or an authoritarian who threatened the foundations of democracy? Was he a brilliant media manipulator or a dangerous demagogue? Did he expose the hypocrisy of the establishment or corrode the institutions that hold society together? The answer, perhaps, is that he was all of these things at once. Trump understood something fundamental about modern America. Institutions had lost the trust of millions of people. The media, Congress, intelligence agencies, even elections themselves, were viewed with suspicion. Trump didn't create that distrust, but he exploited it masterfully. He offered simple explanations for complex problems. He gave people enemies to blame. He promised that he alone could fix everything. And for millions of Americans, that was enough. His presidency shattered norms that had guided American politics for decades. The idea that presidents should be truthful, that they should respect the independence of law enforcement, that they should concede elections when they lose, that they should put country above self. Trump viewed these norms as weaknesses, constraints that only applied to losers. He broke every rule and was rewarded for it. But what nobody expected was how this would reshape American politics permanently. Both parties have been transformed. Republicans abandoned their traditional conservatism and became the party of Trump. Free trade, deficit reduction, international alliances, all the old orthodoxies were discarded. Now the party stands for whatever Trump says it stands for. Loyalty to him became the only test that mattered. Democrats, meanwhile, struggled to find a response. Do you go high when they go low, as Michelle Obama once said? Or do you fight fire with fire? The party fractured between moderates who wanted to restore norms and progressives who wanted to fight Trump with equal ferocity. That tension remains unresolved. The media landscape changed forever. Trump's attacks on fake news were effective because trust in journalism had already been declining for years. But Trump accelerated that decline. His supporters now exist in entirely separate information ecosystems. They have their own news sources, their own facts, their own reality. Bridging that divide may be impossible. The international consequences were equally profound. America's allies no longer knew if they could rely on U.S. commitments. Trump pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement. He abandoned the Iran nuclear deal. He threatened to leave NATO. He praised dictators like Putin, Xi, and Kim Jong-un while insulting democratic leaders. American soft power, built over decades, eroded rapidly. Adversaries saw opportunity. Russia invaded Ukraine, calculating that Trump would not support a strong response. China grew more aggressive toward Taiwan. Iran expanded its nuclear program. The world order that America had led since World War II began to fracture. Whether it can be rebuilt remains an open question. But perhaps Trump's greatest impact was on American democracy itself. The peaceful transfer of power had been sacred. It was what separated America from banana republics and authoritarian regimes. Trump tried to break that, and nearly succeeded. The fact that he was rewarded with a second term sent a message. You can attempt to overturn an election and still become president again. What does that mean for the future? If Trump or future leaders believe they can reject election results they don't like, where does that lead? If violence becomes an acceptable tool of political persuasion, as it was on January 6th, where does that end? These aren't theoretical questions. They're urgent threats to the survival of American democracy. Trump's defenders argue that this is hyperbole. They say the system held. Biden was inaugurated. The courts worked. Congress certified the results. Democracy survived. But survival isn't the same as health. A patient who survives a heart attack is still in danger. American democracy survived Trump's first term, survived January 6th, but it emerged weakened, more fragile than before.